Millionaire CEO finds homeless woman with triplets identical to him, and the truth shatters him. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The music was elegant, the kind that curled around your ears like silk and whispered of old money and newer lies. Chandeliers dripped light over a sea of tuxedos and backless gowns, and laughter, hollow, polished, rehearsed, rose in champagne bubbles to the high ceiling of the Worthington Hotel's ballroom. Ethan Blackwood stood at the edge of it all, a glass of something expensive and tasteless in his hand, his smile as practiced as the violinist's bow strokes. He nodded when expected, laughed on cue, and said just enough to seem warm without ever opening the door to anything real. The fundraiser was for children's literacy, or maybe clean water in rural Kentucky. He hadn't read the program. His fiancée, Veronica Hale, glided past in a sleek black dress, all elegance and control, whispering something to the governor's wife. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Everything about her said, "We're winning." And Ethan, dressed in the uniform of their world, played the part. But as the evening dragged on, he felt it again, that restless itch beneath his skin. The one that always came when the room grew too glossy, the people too proud of their cruelty dressed up as charity. He left before dessert. Slipping out into the night without explanation, he handed his valet ticket to a stunned teenager who clearly recognized him but said nothing. Ethan walked, no security, no driver, no destination, just a slow, aimless stroll through a city he barely knew anymore, despite technically owning half of it. He passed shuttered storefronts and dimly lit delis. A woman argued with a man over a plastic bag near a laundromat. Somewhere a car alarm coughed and then died. The city smelled like wet concrete and cigarettes. Then he turned onto a street he didn't recognize. Narrow, dim, somehow untouched by gentrification. There were no streetlights, just a flickering neon open sign clinging to a dusty corner bodega, buzzing like it was trying to speak. And that's when he saw her. She was sitting on the curb, her back to a boarded-up building, arms wrapped protectively around three little girls. They huddled close, their clothes thin and torn, their shoes mismatched. One clutched a stuffed rabbit with a missing ear. Another coughed, a wet, tired sound that hit him like a slap. The woman looked up. Dirty hair clung to her forehead. Her face was gaunt, pale, marked by exhaustion, and something worse, resignation. Ethan froze. The street narrowed. Everything, outside of his field of vision, blurring into static. The woman's eyes, the girl's eyes. They were the same. All four of them shared the same unmistakable gray-blue, flecked with amber, eyes he'd only ever seen in a mirror. He took a step forward. "Clara?" The woman flinched like she'd been struck. She pulled the girls tighter, her entire body stiffening. The oldest of the three, maybe 7, stared up at him with defiance and fear warring in her expression. The smallest, maybe 4, began to cry. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. His heart was racing, lungs suddenly too small, too tight. It couldn't be, but it was Clara Dawson, the name he had buried a decade ago, the girl who disappeared without a word. The ghost he tried to forget. And now she was here, on a forgotten street that shouldn't exist, cradling 3 little girls who wore his eyes like a sentence. The wind picked up, lifting Clara's hair just enough for him to see the bruise blooming along her jaw. Her lips parted, cracked and pale. "You shouldn't be here." He took another step, voice low, shaking. "Clara, are they?" She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just whispered, "You know what you did." His knees almost gave. She stood slowly, every movement protective. The girls clung to her, all 3 of them. One tucked her face into Clara's coat. Another watched Ethan with terrifying calm. He couldn't move. Clara turned and walked away. Ethan stood in the cold, watching the street that shouldn't exist swallow them whole. The street was still there. Ethan returned the next morning, though. Part of him expected it to vanish with the dawn, as if the entire encounter had been some ghostly hallucination brought on by guilt and cheap scotch. But no. The neon bodega sign still flickered. The sidewalk still bore the shape of her knees in a shallow smear of dirt. The boarded-up building was still empty, lifeless, like a broken tooth in the jaw of the city. He found them 5 blocks away, near an abandoned train station. Clara sat beneath a skeletal tree, legs pulled to her chest, the girls playing with bottle caps and sticks nearby. No toys, no bags, no sign of any kind of home. She saw him coming. Didn't run, didn't speak, just looked at him the way someone looks at the sky before it rains, with dread and quiet fury. Ethan didn't stop walking until he was only a few feet away. The air between them pulsed like static. He pointed toward the girls. "They're mine." Clara didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around her knees. Her body was still, but her eyes were wild. "Say it," he demanded. "Clara," she exhaled, slowly, as if it pained her to form the words. "They're yours." The words hit like a car crash. The oldest girl, Grace, he would learn later, stood protectively in front of the others. She reminded him of a wolf pup, too small to be dangerous but ready to bite anyway. Ethan stared at them. All 3 had his eyes, his crooked right eyebrow, his chin. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Clara finally stood, wrapping one arm around Grace's shoulders. Her face was drawn but solid. No tears, no trembling. "How old are they?" he asked. Clara didn't look at him when she answered. 7. He did the math in his head. 7. That summer, the one she left without goodbye, without explanation. "You never told me." "I couldn't. You chose not to." Clara laughed. It was a bitter, hoarse thing. "You think I had a choice?" Ethan opened his mouth, but she cut him off with a glance so sharp it felt like a slap. "You lived in a penthouse. I lived in my car. You had a staff. I had 3 newborns and a closet full of secrets no one wanted to believe." He swallowed. "You should have come to me. You know what you did," she said again, more softly this time, almost like a prayer. "You know what you did, Ethan." The words twisted in his gut. "No, I don't." Clara's hand fell to her side, fingers clenching. The girls watched silently. Ethan took a cautious step forward, voice cracking. Why didn't someone tell me? My father, my lawyers. Hell, you?" Clara finally looked him in the eye. "Because they made sure you wouldn't listen. And by the time I realized what was happening, I was already invisible." The wind blew dust across the sidewalk. Ethan's voice fell into a whisper. "Clara, why didn't you fight?" She gave him a look that nearly dropped him to his knees. "I did fight. Every single day I fought hunger, I fought cold. I fought with myself every time one of them got sick and I couldn't afford medicine. Don't you dare stand there in your $1,000 coat and ask me why I didn't fight." The youngest girl, Sophie, began to cry again. Clara picked her up gently, her body instinctively shielding her daughter from everything, even words. "You don't get to show up and act like a hero," Clara said, quieter now. "You don't get to fix this with a hotel suite and guilt." "I'm not trying to fix anything," Ethan said. I saw them. I saw you, and I can't walk away." Clara studied him. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, "That's what you said the first time, right before you disappeared." Ethan flinched. She adjusted Sophie in her arms and began to walk past him, guiding the girls down the cracked sidewalk. He turned, following. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere you won't." "Please, Clara." She paused, not turning around. Her voice came tired, thin, like thread worn too long. "Don't follow us." Then she was gone again, 3 small shadows trailing behind her. Ethan stood alone, the weight of 7 years pressing down on his chest. His world, the one built of boardrooms, contracts, and curated appearances, had cracked in one night. And on the other side of that rupture stood 3 little girls with his eyes and a woman who used to say his name like it meant something. And now she couldn't even say it without trembling. He had questions, but first he needed to find out what the hell he had done. The penthouse felt too clean. Ethan stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 47th-story living room, watching the city blink beneath him like it had something to say. But all he heard was silence and the memory of Clara's voice. "You know what you did. He didn't sleep, didn't shower, didn't go to work. He called her name 100 different ways in his head. Softly, like he used to. Angrily, like the last time. Desperately, like now. He sent out investigators quietly. He had contacts that could find anyone, even people who didn't want to be found. By nightfall, they returned with a location. A one-star motel outside the city. Almost rural. Off the freeway, past the kind of exits that didn't make postcards. He didn't bring a driver. He didn't tell Veronica. He just went. The motel reeked of mildew and loneliness. Room 9. Paint peeling. A single bulb buzzing near the door. Ethan stood in front of it for too long. Listening. Breathing. Not breathing. He knocked. No one answered. He knocked again. 3 slow raps. Then the door opened just a crack. Grace stared at him through the chain lock, eyes narrowed. She didn't speak. Neither did he. After a moment, she shut the door. A second passed. Then the chain slid back. The door opened. Clara was there. Same coat, same bruise, same eyes. She looked tired enough to vanish. "You came," she said, not with surprise, but something more like disbelief. "You let me find you," Ethan replied, just as quietly. Behind her, the room was small, yellow-lit, with a single bed and a fold-out cot. Plastic bag of groceries sat on the floor. Sophie snored softly on a blanket by the heater. Lily, silent again, sat on the bed drawing something with a broken crayon. "Don't think this means I forgive you," Clara said, stepping aside. "They just needed somewhere warm, and you owe me a roof." "I owe you a lifetime," he muttered. She didn't respond. That night, they didn't fight. They didn't talk. Not really. He ordered food. Watched the girls eat like it was the first time they didn't have to count bites. Clara took only a few forkfuls, watching them the entire time like someone might steal them from her. Ethan sat on the edge of the cot, not speaking. When the girls finally slept, Clara joined him, not close but not far. The motel heater rattled behind them. "You want answers?" she said flatly. "I want the truth." She nodded once. Looked down at her hands. "I was 3 months pregnant when I found out." He flinched. "You didn't answer my calls." "I thought, maybe you were out of town. I didn't panic, not yet." Ethan's mouth opened, but she lifted a hand. "Then your assistant told me you were restructuring your personal life and wouldn't be returning my calls." He blinked. "No one told me anything. You had dinner with your father the next day," she said, calm now. "He called me a distraction. Said you were getting engaged to Veronica and that I needed to go quietly. That never happened. I never—" Clara turned to him, and her eyes weren't tired now. They were bright with something sharp. Not hate, not grief, truth. "He offered me a check, Ethan, $500,000. To disappear. I didn't take it." Ethan's breath caught. "I didn't want your money. I wanted you to show up, to see me, but when I refused, things got worse. My lease got pulled, my account got frozen. My references dried up. No one would hire me. No one would house me. I had nothing." Silence roared in the room. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were shaking. "You think I knew," he said hoarsely. "I think you didn't care." His jaw clenched. "That's not fair." "No," she whispered. "It's not." They sat in the heat and the silence for a long time. Eventually, Clara stood and pulled a blanket over the girls. Ethan didn't move. As she reached for the light, he asked, "Why didn't you tell them about me?" She paused. They asked once. "Said your name, and Sophie said it sounded like a magic spell. Grace said she didn't want to believe in spells." "And Lily?" Clara smiled, a sad, strange smile. "She never asked." The light clicked off. Darkness. "I never stopped loving you," Ethan whispered into it. "I know," she replied, and then, "That's what made it worse. There are moments when the past drips into the present like a crack in the ceiling, quiet at first, then it floods." For Ethan Blackwood, the flood began with a camera flash. It was supposed to be just another dinner, high-end, overpriced, curated, to impress men who'd already made up their minds, investors, stakeholders, future partners, all of them half listening to Ethan speak while secretly checking the stock ticker under the table. Veronica sat beside him, flawless in emerald silk, laughing too loudly at the senator's joke. She hadn't noticed the distance yet. Or maybe she had and didn't care. That was the thing about Veronica Hale. She didn't cling, she conquered. The event was held at the Langford, a rooftop affair beneath golden lanterns and an artificial moonlight filter that made everyone look 10 years younger. Ethan's tie felt like a noose. He excused himself after dessert, and then he saw the journalist. She wasn't famous, not a big network name, but Ethan knew her type. Small-time publication. Big-time instincts. The kind that didn't blink around. Power. She caught him at the balcony alone, nursing a drink he hadn't touched. "Mr. Blackwood," she said smoothly, holding up her press badge like it was a scalpel. "Samantha Crest, City Wire. Mind if I ask a few questions?" Ethan gave her a neutral smile. "It's not really the venue for interviews." She smiled back, the kind of smile you see just before a trap snaps shut. "Oh, I agree, but I thought, you might want to comment in before the story drops tomorrow." Ethan didn't move. "What story?" Samantha held up her phone and tapped the screen. A photo appeared. There he was, standing outside the motel, and behind him, fuzzy but unmistakable, Clara holding Lily's hand. Grace and Sophie peeking out from behind her. The angle was perfect. The ike. Caption underneath read, "Ethan Blackwood's hidden family." His blood turned to ice. Samantha's voice was soft now. Too soft. "People want to know who she is and who they are." Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't. "I've already verified her name," she added. "Clara Dawson, former personal assistant. Went missing for years. The internet loves a mystery, Mr. Blackwood, especially when it's personal." He snatched the phone from her hand, deleting the photo from the screen before she could stop him. "You run that story and you'll wish you hadn't." Samantha raised an eyebrow, undeterred. "You just confirmed it's true." She walked away before he could speak, and the flood began. By morning it was everywhere. Headlines screamed, blogs speculated. News segments played soft piano under photos of Clara stepping into his building. Her face blurred. The girls' faces. Not the words illegitimate, secret, and scandal were used with glee. Ethan tried to shut it down. Lawyers, PR teams, spokespersons. But the story was out. And it had teeth. By midday, Veronica barged into his office, holding her phone like it was poison. "You didn't tell me." Her voice wasn't angry. It was precise, controlled, dangerous. "I didn't know," Ethan said, standing. "Not until 3 days ago." Veronica walked in slow circles like a cat choosing a spot to claw. "There are 3 of them, Ethan. I know." "And you didn't know? For 7 years?" He didn't answer. She stopped moving. "You slept beside me. You proposed to me. I didn't lie to you. You just conveniently forgot that you might have fathered 3 children with your missing assistant." He rubbed his eyes, exhausted. "I didn't know. And if I had, I wouldn't have kept it from you. I would have." She laughed bitterly. "What? Publicly acknowledged them? Invited them to the wedding?" His silence answered for him. Veronica walked to the window, staring out. "Do you love her?" The question struck harder than it should have. He didn't speak. "You do," she said, not with rage, but with contempt. "You always did. Even when you didn't know, you still did." Ethan took a step forward. "Veronica!" She raised a hand. "Don't. Just don't." She turned, elegant even in collapse. "You're about to become a story, Ethan, and I'm not going to be the villain in it. You want to fix this? You want to be noble? Fine, but don't expect me to applaud when the house burns down." Then she left. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. That wasn't her style. Ethan sat at his desk long after she was gone. Every screen in the room buzzed with his failure. Clara's name. The girls' faces. Analysts speculating on what this meant for Blackwood Holdings. He turned. All off. The silence was louder. Then his phone vibrated. A message. No name, just a number. You wanted answers. Now the whole world's asking too. Happy now? She stared at the message for a long time. Then he stood. The moment the elevator. Doors opened. The war room buzzed like a beehive cracked open. Screens flickered with news clips, social media feeds, and legal memos. Phones rang nonstop. An assistant whispered into a Bluetooth earpiece while typing furiously. Every face turned when Ethan entered. "Close the door," he said. 12 people froze, then obeyed. He walked to the head of the table, ignoring the seat, arms crossed as if he needed to physically hold himself together. "Where's Clara?" No one answered. "I asked you a question." A junior associate cleared his throat. "She left the motel early this morning. No credit cards. Took the girls, we don't know where." Ethan's jaw clenched. "So you lost them?" "We weren't authorized to." "I'm not asking about authorization," he snapped. "I'm asking why the hell a team of professionals let a woman with 3 children disappear from a monitored location." Silence. He looked at his top advisor. "Legal? We can prepare a press statement denying paternity, discredit her credibility." "I'm not denying anything," Ethan cut in. She blinked. "Then we control the angle. Offer a human interest piece. Philanthropist reconnects with long-lost Mayerwai. Family. Spin it clean." "No spin." The PR director hesitated. "Ethan, if we don't control the narrative, someone else will. That photo already hit international wires. The market dipped 3% this morning. Shareholders are..." "They'll wait," he said flatly. "Veronica already issued a statement to the Tribune," another added. He turned sharply. "What kind of statement?" "That she was unaware of your past and is currently re-evaluating future commitments." He gave a cold, humorless laugh. "She makes it sound like I dented her car." "We can still salvage your reputation," someone said from the corner. Ethan's eyes burned. "My reputation is the least of my concerns." "Ethan," his legal advisor said carefully, "we have reason to believe this woman might try to sue." "She won't. You don't know that." He stared at them and something in his voice dropped, low and dangerous. "She doesn't want money." They didn't understand. Couldn't. Clara had disappeared, not to blackmail, not to exploit, but to survive. And he had let her vanish, once. He wouldn't do it again. That night his penthouse was colder than usual. Veronica's things were gone. Her perfumes. Her heels lined by the wall. The art she pretended to like. Silence had moved in. He sat alone, staring at an untouched dinner. Outside, the city crawled with paparazzi. Then he checked his phone again. Still no messages. Still nothing. Clara had left. With the girls. Gone. He stood suddenly, restless, stifled. He wasn't used to being powerless. Not like this. In boardrooms, he wielded silence like a weapon. But here, in this mess, silence only made it worse. He opened a drawer. Found the old photo, the only one he'd never deleted. Clara, barefoot in the snow, holding a mug in both hands, laughing. The timestamp read January 2016, 4 weeks before she vanished. He sat back, gripping the frame. Then he saw it, barely visible in the corner of the photo. A rusted street sign behind her. Meriton, a forgotten town. He remembered now. She'd grown up near there. Mentioned it once during a snowstorm when they were still them. He stood again, sudden clarity washing over him. She wasn't hiding randomly. She was going home. By sunrise, Ethan was gone. No security, no car service. Just a duffel bag and a... Mimi wasn't coming to buy anything this time, only to listen and hope it wasn't too late. Meriton, Kentucky. It wasn't on most maps anymore. A place that time hadn't just forgotten. It had abandoned. Half the streetlights didn't work. The gas station sold expired candy bars and cheap coffee in stained paper cups. The air smelled like damp earth and burnt oil. But Ethan knew this was where she'd gone. He didn't call ahead, didn't send a car, didn't even book a hotel. He just followed a memory. Clara mentioning her grandmother's church off a back road near an old canning plant, back when they used to talk about childhoods like they were dreams. The shelter was easy to miss. A peeling sign that read Willow House hung crooked above a doorway that sagged under its own weight. It didn't look like a place children should sleep. He knocked. A tired woman in scrubs opened the door. She looked him up and down like she'd seen a dozen like him, and none had left a good impression. "She's not looking for visitors," the woman said. "I'm not a visitor." The woman leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're him, aren't you?" "I don't know what she's told you, but—" "Enough," she said, not unkindly. "Enough to make me keep the door open anyway." Ethan stepped inside. The place smelled like powdered soup and baby shampoo. Quiet voices echoed down the hall. A radio played something gospel in the kitchen. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. "She's down the hall, second room on the left," the woman said. He hesitated. "Thank you." "Don't thank." "Yet," she muttered, walking away. Clara opened the door before he knocked. She looked like she hadn't slept. Neither had he. The girls were curled up on cots behind her, Sophie with her thumb in her mouth, Grace with a book covering her face, and Lily just watching. She didn't say a word. Just stared at him with those endless eyes. Clara stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. She didn't bother asking how he found her. "I brought food," Ethan said. She blinked. "What?" He held up the bag. Simple stuff. Sandwiches. Juice boxes, apples. "I didn't come to talk, or beg, or explain," she raised a brow. "Then what did you come for?" He held out the bag. "I came to give you this." She didn't move, didn't take it. He gently set it by the door, then reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small, folded note. She looked at it, hesitant, then opened it. It said only, "I'm not here to buy. I'm here to listen." She didn't speak, didn't cry, but her hand gripped the paper like, might slip away if she let go. "I'll be at the motel on 3rd, he said softly. "Room 5, if you want to talk or yell or say nothing at all." He turned to leave. "Ethan." Her voice was thin but clear. He stopped. She looked at the note again, then at him. "You should have listened 7 years ago." "I know." He nodded once and walked away. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of a worn motel bed staring at the ceiling while rain traced paths down the window. He didn't expect her to come. Not yet. But he'd made his first real choice. Not as a CEO. Not as a man trying to salvage an image. As a father. And a man who, for the first time in his life, had nothing left to offer but honesty. Ethan was half asleep, or maybe dreaming with his eyes open, when the knock came. 3 gentle taps, then silence. He crossed the small motel room, heart suddenly louder than his footsteps. He opened the door. There she was. Clara stood under a gray sky, hood pulled over. Her hair, one hand resting lightly on Grace's shoulder. Behind them, Sophie clutched a stuffed rabbit, and Lily stared at Ethan like she was trying to memorize his face in case it vanished again. Clara didn't say anything. She didn't have to. He stepped back. They entered the room slowly, warily, like guests in a stranger's house. Which, in a way, they were. Clara sat in the corner with arms crossed. Protective, present, but distant. The girls hesitated. Ethan knelt beside the small table near the window and set out some puzzles, picture books, and markers. Nothing fancy. Just things he bought from the general store on his way back last night. Sophie sat first. She drew a wobbly circle with a purple marker and looked up at him like she was waiting for permission. He smiled. "That's a great circle." She blinked, then went back to drawing. Grace hovered closer but didn't sit. "What do you do?" "I work with buildings." "What kind of buildings?" "Big ones, glass and metal." She nodded, unimpressed. "Do you like it?" "I used to," he said honestly. Grace's brow furrowed as if trying to decide if that answer meant he was safe or not. Lily said nothing. She stood near the door, arms loose at her side, just watching. Ethan smiled gently at her. "Do you like books?" She nodded once. He picked one up and held it toward her. A fairy tale collection, old but sturdy. She stepped forward slowly, took it from his hand, and retreated to the floor. No eye contact, no words. But she hadn't run. Progress. 2 hours passed. Clara hadn't spoken once. She just sat, arms around her knees, watching him, watching them as if waiting for him to break. He didn't. He poured juice, peeled apples, helped Sophie with her glitter marker when it got stuck, and then something strange happened. Grace laughed. It was quick, soft. A breath more than a sound, but real. Ethan looked up in surprise. Clara noticed it too. Grace caught herself, glanced at her mother. The joy vanished as fast as it came. Later, while Clara helped the girls into their jackets, Ethan stood awkwardly by the door. "I know I'm a stranger to them," he said. "You're more than that," Clara replied. "You're an idea that's harder to break." He nodded slowly. "I'll come by again tomorrow," she added. Ethan tried not to react, tried not to let that mean something too fast. Clara looked down at Sophie, who was now tugging on her hand, humming to herself. Then she looked up at Ethan and said softly, "They asked me once why you weren't in any of our pictures." His chest tightened. "What did you say?" "I said you were lost," he swallowed. That was true. Clara met his eyes, and for the first time in 7 years, she didn't look away. They had 4 days of something like peace. Ethan met the girls in the park each morning, brought warm pastries, hot cocoa, new sketchbooks. Clara always came with them but sat apart, on benches, under trees, eyes narrowed behind guarded silence. The girls started to relax. Sophie held his hand as they crossed the street. Grace argued with him about cartoons. Lily never said a word, but she now sat beside him, close enough for her arm to brush his. He didn't push. He just showed up, every day until the world found them again. The first sign came from a whisper, an older woman outside the church shelter murmuring, "Is that him?" As Clara passed with the girls, then a man snapped a photo from a parked car. By evening, their faces were back online, but this time not just Clara's, Sophie's wide eyes. Grace mid-laugh, Lily's silent stare. Someone had tagged the town merit in Takwi. The next morning, Ethan opened the motel room door and found 2 reporters waiting beside a black SUV. "Mr. Blackwood, can you comment on the allegations? Is it true the children were kept from you illegally?" He stepped back and slammed the door. 30 minutes later, he moved Clara and the girls to a cottage he'd rented just outside town. It was old and drafty, but private. It had a fence. Clara didn't thank him, but she didn't refuse. 2 days passed before the pressure boiled over. Clara was cleaning dried paint off Grace's jeans when Ethan's phone rang. His assistant panicked. The board had called an emergency meeting. The press wanted statements. Investors were pulling out. The scandal, mixed with the sudden media silence, made them nervous. And Veronica? She'd given her first on-camera interview. Ethan watched it on mute in the cottage kitchen, phone shaking slightly in his hand. She was poised, controlled, beautiful as always. "I loved Ethan," she said, "but clearly I didn't know him. None of us did." Then came the cut. A blurry video of Clara stepping out of the motel, girls in tow, Ethan in the background. The reporter's voiceover was brutal. "The man worth $8.4 billion. The woman no," one believed. And the daughters he never claimed. Ethan closed the video. Clara stood behind him. Her arms were crossed, face pale. They filmed the girls. "I'll fix it," he said. Her laugh was bitter. "You can't fix what you never tried to protect." He stepped forward. "I am trying. You're trying now, after 7 years. He lowered his voice. "I didn't know. You didn't ask." Outside, Sophie cried as a drone buzzed past the fence. Ethan's fists clenched. "This is not their story to twist." Clara's voice cracked. "It was never supposed to be a story at all." "Then what happens next, Ethan? When your enemies smell blood, when your past comes crawling back with claws?" He looked her in the eye, and for the first time, he didn't have an answer. He found out the answer later that night. An email. Anonymous. Just a single sentence, Marcus Vellman knows. And beneath it a screenshot of a private message. Marcus forwarding an internal photo from Blackwood Holdings with the subject line, "Let's put this to use." Ethan stared at the screen. His chest went still. The wolves weren't just watching, they were circling. The boardroom was full. 12 men and women sat stiffly around the polished table, each one worth enough to never answer to anyone. Until now, Ethan stood at the head, sleeves rolled, jaw set, watching them watch him like a falcon stalked by a dozen field mice. On the screens behind him, news headlines flickered, Blackwood legacy in crisis. From billionaire to deadbeat dad, Veronica Hale breaks her silence. None of them said it out loud, but they were here to push him out, and he knew it. He let the silence thicken. Before speaking, "If any of you think this is about bad optics, walk out now. You've already missed the point." A few exchanged glances. One cleared his throat. "Ethan, we support you. But this story, it's not going away. And we have shareholders, employees, international partners watching us unravel." "I'm not unraveling," Ethan said, voice calm. "I'm protecting my children." Someone scoffed lightly, and he turned to them. "You have something to say, Walter?" The older man shifted in his seat. "You've always separated your personal life. That was the contract. Now you're emotional." Ethan gave a half smile. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." A younger board member leaned in. "There's a path forward. Controlled PR campaign. Limit Clara's exposure. Appearances with the girls. Make it palatable. Public likes redemption stories." Ethan stared at him. "No," the room blinked. "No staged playdates, no softened truth, no more treating people like assets." Walter sighed. "And what, Ethan? You walk away from all this?" Ethan looked out the window, then back at them. "Yes," a pause, then, "I have nothing left to prove, and everything to protect." The room exploded with murmurs. "You're resigning?" "I'm deciding," Ethan said, stepping back from the table. "I've run this company half my life, built it into something I'm proud of. But if you think I'll keep bleeding for a machine that chokes on human dignity, you're wrong." He reached for the stack of prepared statements on the table, drafts from PR. He tore them in half. "My daughters aren't bargaining chips. Clara's not a footnote." And then quietly, "They are my family, and I will not apologize for them." Silence. But the silence felt different now. Some of them watched him with resentment, others with something else. Respect? Fear? Maybe both. Back. At the cottage, the girls were playing in the grass with Clara near the porch. She looked up as he stepped out of the car. Her expression was cautious. "What happened?" Ethan walked straight to her. "I told them. Everything." Clara raised an eyebrow. "And?" "I'm still standing." He turned to the girls. And for the first time, without any press, without any cameras, without lawyers or image consultants, he said the words out loud. "I'm your father." Sophie giggled. Grace blinked. Lily looked up, then whispered, Joey. Clara stood very still. Then she said, without softness but not without feeling, "It took you long enough." Ethan nodded. "Let's catch up then." It started with a question that wouldn't let Ethan sleep. "You know what you did." He hadn't, but he would now. He'd always believed Clara just left, a coward's escape. Or worse, a calculated one. But the puzzle pieces had never really fit. Not her silence. Not the cold way she shut him out. Not the missing money that vanished from one of his father's private accounts the week she disappeared. That account. Ethan had ignored it back then. Trusted the narrative that Clara had stolen. Betrayed. Vanished. He no longer trusted anyone's version but his own. So he went looking. The Blackwood Holdings archives were buried 4 floors below the main tower. A restricted vault. Most executives didn't even know it existed. But Ethan had keys most people never earned. It took hours, files on encrypted drives, audio recordings logged under old legal disputes, email threads routed through private servers, and then one folder hidden behind innocuous labels, Employee Exit, CD 2016. His breath stilled. Clara Dawson. Inside were transcripts of phone calls, emails between his father and the head of legal, surveillance photos, one in particular, Clara standing outside a bank, expression furious. Belly visibly pregnant. The timestamp? 2 days after she stopped coming to work, but it was the recording that cracked something inside Ethan wide open. His father's voice, clear, calculated, familiar. She's refusing the settlement. Still insists she's carrying his child. She'll disappear. They always do if you make it difficult enough. A second voice. Marcus Vellman. You want me to make it official? Blackwood Sr. Clean, no noise. I don't care how it happens. The file ended there. Ethan sat in the darkness, the recording still echoing in his skull. His father had orchestrated everything, the eviction, the smear campaign, the silence, all of it to erase Clara. And Marcus had known, had helped. Ethan stared at the screen, bile rising. They had stolen years from him, from Clara, from 3 girls who thought he hadn't wanted them. That night, he returned to the cottage in silence. The girls were asleep. Clara was in the kitchen, folding laundry. By hand. He stood in the doorway, shaking. She turned, saw his face. What happened? He walked to the table and set the flash drive down like it was a loaded weapon. She looked at it, then at him. I know the truth now, he said. She didn't move. I found the recording. My father paid you to leave. You said no. He tried to brace you anyway. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded once. I told you. He sat slowly, like the weight in his chest might crush him. I was so sure you walked away, that you didn't want any of it. You believe that? I believed what I needed to believe, he said softly. Because the other option meant everything I stood on was built on a lie. Clara reached for the flash drive, held it in her hand. You know Marcus helped him, Ethan added. Her gaze hardened. Of course he did. He knew about the girls. Clara was quiet. Then, I almost mailed you a letter. Once. When Sophie had that fever. When Lily wouldn't sleep unless I sang. Why didn't you? She met his eyes. Because I didn't want to ask for help. I wanted to ask for you, and I wasn't sure anymore if there was a difference. Ethan bowed his head. I'm here now. You're late. But I'm not leaving. Silence settled around them again. She stood, arms around herself. I believe you, Ethan. But don't expect forgiveness overnight. I don't, he said, then looked toward the hallway where the girls slept. I just want to be worth their trust. Clara nodded, a long, heavy breath. I guess we both have work to do. The storm came in around midnight. Rain hammered the day. Roof of the cottage and wind clawed at the windows like it had something to say. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Ethan lay awake on the pull-out couch, fully dressed, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. He couldn't stop seeing Clara's face when she listened to the recording. She didn't scream. She didn't break. She just absorbed the pain, like she'd been practicing it. His chest tightened. He'd always believed she was strong. He had never understood how much. He turned toward the window. Trees danced under lightning flashes. A branch snapped somewhere near the porch. Then, a soft knock at the bedroom door. It wasn't Clara's. He sat up fast. Another knock, smaller, like hesitation wearing skin. He rose and padded across the hallway. He opened the door slowly. Grace stood there, hair messy from sleep, pajama top with faded stars, barefoot. She looked up at him with wide, tired eyes. I didn't want to wake Mommy. Ethan knelt to her level. Is everything okay? She nodded, then shook her head, then looked at the floor. Can I sit with you for a minute? He stepped back without a word and led her to the couch. She climbed up slowly, legs crossed, arms hugging her knees. They sat in silence, the storm buzzing against the glass. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, are you really my dad? The words weren't angry, just uncertain. Raw, Ethan looked at her, eyes stinging. Yes, I am. Grace picked at a loose thread in her sleeve. Why didn't you come sooner? He swallowed hard. Because I didn't know you were here. Her voice dropped so soft it barely reached him. But Mommy knew. She tried to tell me, he said, but someone made sure I wouldn't listen. Grace's mouth quivered. She cried sometimes. At night. I heard her. I used to pretend I didn't. Ethan didn't know what to say. Grace looked at him again. Is it okay that I want to believe you? He reached over slowly, so slowly, and took her hand. Yes, he whispered. It's more than okay. She nodded, small and serious, then barely audible. Mommy's scared. Ethan blinked. Of what? She thinks if we love you too fast, you'll leave. Like a dream. He didn't answer, didn't trust his voice. Grace leaned against him, quietly, like a leaf folding in on itself. I don't care if you're late, she said, and he let himself cry for the first time. Not loudly, not broken, just enough to feel it. He stayed awake until she fell asleep, curled against him. Sometime before dawn, Clara appeared in the hallway, wordless, and stood watching them. Ethan met. Her eyes. She didn't speak. She just nodded and went back to her room. It started with a video, 2 minutes and 11 seconds. Clara's voice, shaky Ethan's shadow across a motel room wall. A soft, tired line from her. I don't want your money. Then a cut, jump. Now her voice, cold, edited. I'll take whatever you give me. Cut, jump Ethan saying, no one can know you're CEO. Here. Overlay. Ethan Blackwood caught paying off secret ex-lover. Illegitimate children at center of a $5 million hush scandal. Posted by a gossip site that barely qualified as journalism, but it didn't matter. It went viral. Within an hour, Clara's name trended in 3 countries. By noon, there were vans parked outside the church. By 2 p.m., Clara's face, unblurred, was on morning talk shows. Anchors asking questions like, why did she hide the children? Was this a long con? Is Ethan Blackwood the real victim here? The cruelty was precise, not loud, not vulgar. Just surgical. Polite in that way. Poison is when it's slipped into your. Down at the cottage, Grace and Lily had to be pulled away from the windows. Sophie cried when she saw her picture on a phone screen held up by a stranger. Clara was shaking, quietly. Not from fear, from rage. Ethan paced, phone to his ear, his voice a growl. I don't care what platform it was posted on. I want it down now, and I want the person who edited it in front of me. The call dropped. Another rang. His PR director. Damage control's not an option anymore. They're calling her unstable. You're being dragged into a cover-up scandal. I don't care. We can't protect your image if you keep defending her publicly. Then stop trying to. He hung up. That night he called a press conference. No handlers, no scripts, just him. A microphone and 1 camera. He wore no tie, no suit jacket, no makeup team. Just stood on the steps of the courthouse near Meriton City Hall. Arms steady, eyes sharp. The world watched. He didn't blink. I'm not here to clean up a scandal, he began. I'm here to tell the truth. He paused. The silence was suffocating. I have 3 daughters. I didn't know about them until recently. And now that I do, I will not hide. I will not let them be dragged through your headlines. Another breath. And Clara Dawson is not a criminal. She is the mother of my children. She did what she had to do to protect them when everyone else, including me, failed her. The flashbulbs didn't stop. She never asked for money. She never asked for fame. And that video, it's a lie, spliced, fabricated. And we will sue every outlet that keeps it live. He stepped back. 1 final sentence. I'm not protecting my reputation. I'm protecting them. Then he walked away. No questions, no rehearsed lines. Just thunder in his chest. Back at the cottage, Clara watched the live feed from the kitchen table. The girls were coloring in the next room. Her hands trembled around the mug. When Ethan walked, and she looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the storm broke. You stood up for us, she said. No, he said gently. I should have stood up years ago. Clara's voice cracked. I don't know if I can keep forgiving you. I'm not asking you to. She nodded. But something shifted in the silence between them. Not healing. Not yet. But something like room to breathe. The invitation came in a black envelope, elegant, heavy. Inside, a gold foil card bearing Ethan Blackwood's name in a thick serif font, Dubai, the World Future Capital Summit. A keynote stage that only opened to billionaires, kings, and disruptors. He was scheduled to speak. 30 minutes, $15 billion worth of pending deals, the kind of event that sealed legacies. He stared at it for a long time. Then he flipped the card over. Someone, probably one of his assistants, had clipped a sticky note to the back. "We need you there. This is your moment." That same day, Clara sat with the girls at the kitchen table, smoothing out a wrinkled flyer from their school. Spring showcase, music, art, and story time. April 22nd, all parents welcome. Sophie had drawn 3 stick figures under the printed letters, 2 with dresses, 1 tall, all holding hands. Lily had scribbled a small sun in the corner, and Grace had written "Dad" in pencil at the bottom. Clara didn't show him the flyer. She didn't need to. They talked less now, but the silences between them had softened. Ethan knew what was at stake. He left the invitation on the dresser for 2 days before finally packing a bag. Black suit, monogrammed cufflinks, blue tie. He booked the flight, sent the confirmations, and told himself he would only miss one event. The hotel suite in Dubai was everything expected. Polished marble, gold fixtures, silent staff. He paced it like a cage. Halfway across the world, Clara was probably braiding Sophie's hair. Grace would be testing her lines for the story presentation. Lily would be drawing. Always drawing. He glanced at his watch. AM in Meriton. He checked his phone. No messages. Of course not. He deserved the silence. The conference began. Lights, applause, choreographed success. Ethan was introduced with a glowing, pre-recorded biography. Photos of his empire. Words like visionary, architect of tomorrow, American success story. He stood backstage waiting for his cue. One last speaker before him, a tech CEO talking about quantum logistics. Behind the curtain, his phone buzzed. A message. "Clara, no." Words. Just a 30-second video. He pressed play. The auditorium backstage disappeared around him. Sophie stood at a microphone, nervous and fidgeting. A teacher's hand gently guided her forward. She took a breath and began to sing, off-key, shaky, sweet, in. The background. Grace waved toward the camera. Lily smiled softly. A second clip followed. Sophie finishing her song, the girls bowing, applause from a modest school auditorium. Then Clara's voice, faint and proud. They did it. Ethan couldn't breathe. Not for the speech, not for the billion-dollar deals, but for this. He looked down at the glowing stage entrance. The host was already calling his name. The applause swelled. His feet didn't move. Then, very slowly, he turned. Away from the light. He walked out, past the green rooms, past the security, out of the building, out of the narrative. 14 hours later, exhausted and unshaven, Ethan walked through the doors of the school gym in Meriton. The showcase was long over. Teachers were cleaning up glitter and foam board displays. The janitor eyed him but said nothing. Then a soft voice behind him, "You bore." "Missed it." "Clara." She didn't sound angry, just tired. He turned. The girls were asleep on the bleachers, coats as blankets. "I saw the video," he said. "I didn't send it for you." He nodded. "Did they ask where I was?" She nodded back. Grace said maybe you were too busy. Ethan looked over at them, asleep under flickering fluorescent lights. "I was." A beat. Busy deciding what matters. Clara didn't smile. But she didn't walk away. The email went out at 6:03 a.m. No signature, no fanfare. Just a subject line. Effective immediately. And one sentence. Success is knowing where you belong. By noon, the media had caught on. Blackwood Holdings' stock paused. Analysts panicked. Morning shows speculated wildly. Some claimed Ethan had been forced out. Others insisted it was damage control. A few framed it as a romantic gesture. A man choosing love over legacy. But no one really knew why. Only Ethan and a small, rapidly packed suitcase did. He stood. In his penthouse for the last time that night, everything was still in its place. The grand piano he hadn't played in years, the sleek, silent wine fridge, Veronica's forgotten lipstick on the bathroom counter, a faint smudge like a ghost of another life. He didn't take much. A framed photo of the girls, the one Clara, let him snap at the park on a rare sunny morning, a small leather journal, and the note Clara had once left folded on his pillow. "You don't have to save me. Just see me." He left everything else, including the keys. When he arrived back in Meriton, it was just after dark. He pulled up to the cottage and saw no lights on. His heart sank. For a second, he thought maybe they'd left. Run again. But then, on the curb, beneath the porch light, he saw them. Clara, sitting cross-legged, arms around Sophie, who was half asleep against her chest. Grace leaned against Lily, who clutched her sketchpad, eyelids heavy but alert. They were waiting. No bags packed, no words, just waiting. He stepped out of the car. Clara looked up, and in the silence that passed, Ethan understood what goodbye really meant. Not words, not doors closing. Goodbye was the decision to walk away from who you used to be, so that you could finally arrive. He crossed the lawn, slow, dropped his bag quietly by the porch steps. Kneeling in front of Clara, he whispered, "It's done." She didn't ask what he meant. Didn't press for details, just asked, "And what now?" He looked at her. Then the girls, then the porch light flickering above them, casting tiny halos, and said simply, "Now we start." She didn't smile, but she leaned just a little closer. That was enough. The papers were served on a Wednesday. No knock, no warning. Just a man in a beige jacket on the porch holding a manila envelope with Ethan's name printed in bold. Inside, a summons, filed by Marcus Velman, a petition to the family court of Fayette County, Kentucky, requesting emergency and custody of Grace Lilly and Sophie Dawson Blackwood. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the details. The accusations weren't just sharp, they were surgical. Clara was painted as unstable, delusional, a drifter with no income, no formal education, and a history of evasive behavior. Ethan was labeled complicit, reckless, manipulative, previously absent, and emotionally volatile. The petition called the girls vulnerable minors in a dangerous, unstructured environment and asked for temporary removal pending evaluation. Clara's breath caught in her throat when he handed her the document. She read it silently. Eyes wide, mouth tight. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "He's trying to take them." Ethan sat across from her at the kitchen table. "He won't succeed." She shook her head, panic bleeding through. "You don't understand. These kinds of accusations, if the court even thinks he's right." "He's not," Ethan said. "And we'll prove it. He's got power, connections, money. I've got truth." Clara looked at him, something fragile and furious. In her stare, "You're not the one they'll rip from her arms." By Friday, it was in every paper. Velman versus Blackwood Dawson, the custody war no one saw coming. Cable pundits called it twisted, messy, high-stakes drama. Online trolls attacked Clara's character. One commentator asked, "What kind of mother? Hides 3 children for 7 years? What no one asked was, what kind of system lets a stranger try to steal them now?" That night, Grace came into the kitchen while Ethan was boiling water for cocoa. She held the court letter in both hands. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. Ethan knelt down. "No," she hesitated. "Mommy cried a lot." He exhaled. "Yeah, I know. Are we gonna have to leave again?" This time he didn't have an answer ready, but she didn't wait for it. She held up a sheet of paper she'd folded in half, her handwriting small and serious. "If you take me, I'll run away." Ethan smiled, though it hurt. "You won't have to." At sunrise, he made the call. To a woman named Judith Ellison, a private investigator turned child welfare advocate. The kind of person who didn't smile much, but listened better than anyone in the room. He sent her everything. The audio file of his father, the transcript of the surveillance, photos, letters. Every receipt Clara had ever saved, showing diapers, school books, doctor visits, proof of care, proof of love. And one more thing, a recording taken the day before from a county social worker. Clara had met with her voluntarily. The worker said on tape, "The children appear, safe, bonded, and emotionally supported. The environment is stable." It was gold, but Ethan didn't feel relief. Not yet. 3 nights before the hearing, a car rolled by the cottage, slow, headlights off. The girls were asleep. Clara watched from the living room window. She didn't blink. Ethan stood behind her. "It won't touch them." She didn't look at him. He already has. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in tone. Pale walls, metal chairs, a judge with gray eyes and a mouth like a straight line drawn in stone. Clara sat at the defendant's table, hands clenched so tightly around the folded note in her lap that the paper had creased like fabric. Ethan sat beside her, silent, still, but beneath his tailored coat, his heart was a drumbeat that wouldn't stop. Across the aisle sat Marcus Velman, smirking, confident, wearing a navy suit that cost more than some homes and holding a file thick with lies. Next to him, a carefully selected attorney. Sharp eyes, sharp voice, reputation for crushing opposition before they stood. He had come to destroy, but Ethan had come for war. "Mr. Velman," the judge said, adjusting his glasses, "you are asserting that the current guardians are unfit. Please explain. Clearly, what qualifies you to take custody of 3 unrelated children?" Marcus stood, polished, poisonous. "I'm not claiming blood relation, Your Honor. I'm claiming moral necessity. These children have been exposed to a woman with no verifiable income, a history of evading institutional support, and, until recently, a man who denied their existence." He turned to the judge with faux gravity. "They are unstable, and they need structure, permanence. I can offer both." The judge nodded. "Do you have evidence of neglect?" Marcus gestured. His attorney stood and launched into a rehearsed monologue. Misleading public appearances, Clara's years without address, Ethan's resignation from his company framed as erratic, a manipulated timeline of events, out-of-context quotes from Clara's old job records. It was clean, tidy, but Ethan had learned something from men like Marcus. Monsters hide in polished suits. So when the judge turned to him and said, "Mr. Blackwood, do you wish to respond?" He stood slowly, and he didn't speak like a billionaire. He spoke like a father. "7 years ago, my father paid Clara Dawson to disappear," Ethan said, steady and clear. "He did it without my knowledge. He forged records, froze her assets, spread rumors that destroyed her life." Murmurs rippled through the room. "I found the proof," he said, holding up a flash drive. "Audio recordings, emails, signed, contracts, all documented, submitted into evidence today." He turned to Marcus, and Mr. Velman, he helped cover it up. The courtroom went still. Ethan's attorney passed copies of transcripts to the judge. Ethan went on, voice lowering. "Clara protected our daughters, alone, while I lived a lie. And when I found them again, she didn't ask for money. She didn't want press. She just wanted them safe." He paused. "They're safe with her." He looked at the judge now. "And they're safe with me." He sat, and for the first time, Clara unclenched her hands. Later that evening, after the judge dismissed the petition, due to lack of cause and credible evidence of parental fitness on both sides, Ethan found Marcus in the corridor. No cameras. No crowd, just them, face to face. Marcus didn't speak, Ethan did. "You went after the only people who never wanted anything from me," he said, quiet and sharp. "That makes you stupid." Marcus laughed, weak. "This doesn't end with a court order." Ethan stepped closer. "No, it ends with you gone." He pulled out an envelope and handed it over. Inside, documents, details of past offshore transfers, tax evasion. Silent witnesses now ready to speak. Marcus's smirk faltered. Ethan leaned in. "You thought I'd break." "I didn't. I chose the fight." A long pause. Then, simply, "Now you disappear." Marcus didn't argue, didn't blink, just turned and walked down the hall, his shoulders somehow smaller than before. Back at the cottage, the girls were asleep. Again, and Clara was at the kitchen table, writing names on school forms with a dull pencil. She didn't say anything when he stepped in, just pushed a stack of blank lines toward him. Under father's name, all three were empty. Ethan took the pencil, wrote his name, 3 times. Slow, permanent. Then, he slid the forms back. Clara looked at him. He looked back and said, "We're done running. The press didn't see it coming. There was no statement, no second press conference, no final curated photo with flashbulbs and clickbait headlines. Just a quiet line added to a company-wide email on a Monday morning. Ethan Blackwood will not be returning to Blackwood Holdings in any capacity." No clarification, no next steps, no PR roadmap. He had simply walked away. They tried calling, emails poured in, board members, investors, media giants. A publisher even offered him 7 figures for a memoir. He didn't answer a single one. Instead, he called his real estate agent and said 2 words, "Sell everything." Within weeks, the penthouse was emptied, the condo in Paris sold, and the vineyard in Napa quietly transferred to a non-profit for families of burn victims. One of Clara's causes from long ago, back when they dreamed about someday and scribbled it on napkins over bad takeout. He bought a house just outside Meriton, small, worn 2 bedrooms, a front porch where the paint peeled off in strips. It smelled faintly of cedar and dust and something he couldn't name, something like peace. He painted the walls himself, learned how to fix a leaking faucet with a YouTube video and a lot of swearing under his breath. He built a bookshelf from scratch, only to realize later it leaned slightly to the left. Clara teased him for it. He left it that way. Every morning he walked the girls to school. Lily never spoke, but she slipped her hand into his. Sophie told him stories about invisible dragons. Grace rolled her eyes but always glanced back to make sure he was still there. They made lunches together, ate cereal for dinner sometimes, argued over what counted as a bedtime story. Clara still slept in the room down the hall. That didn't change, but every now and then he'd catch her standing in the doorway just watching him, not with softness but not with steel either, with curiosity, as if trying to figure out if this version of Ethan was real. So he kept showing up, quietly, fully, consistently. One afternoon he found a box left on the front porch. No note. Inside, gold pen, old, worn, his father's, the one that used to sit on the desk in his office, a symbol of everything Ethan thought he was supposed to become. He stared at it, then tossed it into the back of the closet. He didn't need it anymore. He had something better now, a pencil, chewed up, shared with Lily for math homework. He never missed another recital, never let another school flyer go unanswered, never treated presents like a gift instead of a right. And when people asked, what happened to Ethan Blackwood, no one quite knew. Some said he'd vanished, others whispered he'd found religion. A few claimed he went off the grid entirely. But if you asked a small school in Meriton or peeked into a narrow house with a leaning bookshelf and sidewalk chalk on the driveway, you'd see him not vanished, not hiding, just home. The mornings were slow now, no calls, no emails, no headlines. Just the kettle on the stove, the smell of toast, and the faint sound of Lily humming as she colored at the kitchen table. Ethan poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. Clara was already seated by the window, her hair loose, eyes on the backyard where the girls chased bubbles under a warm sun. He handed her a mug without a word. She accepted it without looking up. That was how things were now. Quiet, comfortable in ways he didn't know comfort could be. They still didn't share a room, but they shared mornings and dinners and moments that didn't ask for explanation. Ethan had learned to slow down, to cook from scratch, to fold laundry without swearing, to tell bedtime stories that changed with each telling, because the girls wanted them to. He'd learned Sophie liked her sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares, that Grace preferred facts over fairy tales, and that Lily Lily didn't speak much, but when she drew, it was always a family of 5. One night, Ethan came home from the market with grocery bags and found Clara asleep on the couch. Sophie curled up beside her. She looked tired but not guarded. Her brow wasn't furrowed. Her hand rested gently on Sophie's back. He didn't wake them, just stood there still, watching, savoring it, because he knew this wasn't forever. Not yet. But it was something. Something like peace. A week later, Grace burst through the front door, a glitter-covered art project in hand. "It's our family tree," she said. Breathless, Ethan crouched down as she handed it to him. 5 stick figures at the roots, herself, Lily, Sophie, Clara, and him. "I didn't know what to write for your job," Grace added. He smiled. "What did you put?" She pointed to a spot under his name. "Dad." He felt something tighten in his chest, a clean kind of ache. No title had ever meant more. Later that night, Clara sat beside him on the porch swing. The girls were inside, watching cartoons in their pajamas. The stars above Meriton were brighter than anything Manhattan had ever offered. Ethan didn't speak. Didn't need to. Clara sipped her tea and rested her head gently against the wooden slats behind her. Not on his shoulder, but close enough to feel. He turned to her, voice soft. "Do you ever think about how quiet it is now?" She nodded. "I used to hate silence," she said. "It felt like a punishment." He waited. She looked out at the night, then added, "Now it feels like permission." He smiled, and the porch swing creaked slowly beneath them. It started with a simple dinner. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, buttered corn, and mashed potatoes in a ceramic bowl that had a crack running through it. Clara joked about it once. "We're all a little cracked. The trick is holding the warmth anyway." Ethan had cooked the meal himself, burned his thumb once, spilled salt twice. Still, the girls ate every bite like it was magic. Grace told a story about a boy at school who dared her to eat a worm. Sophie made gagging noises for effect. Lily giggled without sound, her whole body shaking gently like laughter was a secret she kept to herself. It was the kind of evening that didn't make headlines, but it stayed in your bones. After dinner, the girls drifted into the living room, sprawled on the couch beneath a worn blanket, cartoons flickering across the screen in soft colors. Clara rinsed dishes in the sink, sleeves pushed up, hair pulled back. Ethan dried with a towel that barely worked. The silence between them was warm. Not full of tension, not waiting for resolution. Just quiet, the kind that grows in the soil of something real. He turned to her, suddenly unsure of how to begin. So he didn't begin with words. He began by setting down the towel, stepping closer. Clara paused, her hand still inside a sudsy plate. She looked at him, not questioning, not pulling away, just looking. He inhaled. "I've been thinking," he said. "That's always dangerous," she replied. But there was a smile at the edge of it. He laughed under his breath. "I keep going over everything we were, everything we weren't, everything we might have been." Clara set the plate down slowly. "I don't want to go back," he continued. "Back there was too much pretending, too much pain." She didn't answer. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out a folded napkin, unfolded it gently. On it was a single line, scribbled in pencil. "I don't want to go back. I want to start." Clara stared at it, then at him. He cleared his throat, eyes suddenly raw. "I'm not asking for what we lost. I'm asking for what we could still build. No flash, no promises I can't keep. Just us. From now on." The faucet dripped once. A cartoon laugh echoed from the other room. Then Clara reached out, took the napkin, folded it, and tucked it into the back pocket of his jeans. Then she stepped forward, leaned her forehead against his, her voice barely a breath. "You're late." "I know," he whispered. She closed her eyes. "But you're here." He wrapped his arms around her, not tightly, not like a rescue, just enough to say, "I'm not going anywhere." And she let him. In the other room, Sophie yelled something about popcorn. Grace responded with mock disgust. Lily drew shapes in the air with her fingers. Clara and Ethan stood in the kitchen, still, quiet, together. Mondays used to be meetings, boardrooms, limos, security details, the smell of leather chairs and expensive coffee and power dressed in silence. Now, Mondays smelled like pancakes and syrup fingers, and children's socks lost under the couch. Ethan stood barefoot in the kitchen, flipping a lopsided pancake while Sophie tapped out a rhythm on the counter with a wooden spoon. Grace corrected her. Lily, as always, said nothing, but pointed to the one pancake that looked more like a boot than a circle, and nodded solemnly, as if declaring it a masterpiece. Clara sat at the table, hair still damp from her shower, sipping tea. She didn't give instructions anymore. She didn't need to. Their mornings had become ritual. Ethan had never known that's what he'd been missing. After breakfast, they walked the girls to school. It was warm out, early spring warmth, soft and gentle, full of promise. Clara carried Sophie's backpack. Ethan held Lily's hand. Grace walked a little ahead, pretending she wasn't smiling. At the gate, the girls disappeared into the building with a wave and a shout. Clara turned to leave, but Ethan paused. "Let's take the long way back," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You just don't want to do the dishes," she teased. He grinned. "That and I just like walking beside you." So they did. The long way took them past the farmer's market, past the bookstore where Clara now volunteered twice a week, past the tiny coffee shop Ethan still couldn't believe served better espresso than anywhere in New York. Everywhere they went, someone waved. A nod here. Smile there. They belonged. Not because of money, not because of reputation, because they'd stayed. That afternoon, Clara did the laundry while Ethan installed a second shelf in Lily's room. Grace had outgrown her old desk chair, so he surprised her with one he'd picked up from a garage sale and repainted yellow. Sophie helped him hide a glitter heart sticker under it, just to see how long it would take Grace to notice. Clara watched from the hallway, arms crossed, expression soft. Ethan turned. "What?" She shook her head. "Nothing," she said. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. That evening after dinner, they folded the girls' clothes together on the living room rug. No one said much. Lily lay on her stomach, sketching with her tongue, peeking out. Sophie recited the names of all 50 states in alphabetical order. Grace dozed off halfway through a book. The house smelled like soap and apples and warmth, and somewhere between the socks and the tiny shirts, Clara leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, not because of exhaustion, not because of obligation, just because he didn't move, didn't speak. He just leaned into her, too. They didn't need to say the word home. It was already there, in the silence, in the folded sleeves, in the way the girls fell asleep across their laps without asking, and in the way Ethan looked at Clara, not with hope or regret, but with something better, something quieter, something earned.